Before we begin today's episode, as ever, I'd like to express sincere thanks to all of our wonderful guests who shared their time with me. I'd also like to thank, importantly, all of you, our wonderful listeners spanning across the globe. So before we kick off today's wrap-up session with the wonderful Claire, I have an appeal. We continue to keep the podcast sponsor free. I know that appeal has come from you folk, the listeners, and we produce it at our own cost. So if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, then please take 10 seconds now to do that, as it really, really helps the show and the quality of guests we can continue to attract. And again, a huge thanks for all the really positive feedback that you've left across Spotify, Apple iTunes, the different podcast platforms that you listen to the show on YouTube as well. Just to share some of that with you, a brilliant podcast. I originally heard Brendan on another podcast, which led me to here. The episodes give amazing insights into behaviors and actions of scaling companies and successful entrepreneurs. I highly recommend Brendan and Claire Colvin's book, Simple Scaling. Thank you. Full of golden information, this podcast has helped me both professionally and personally. I would encourage anyone to submerge themselves into this content. Every episode has multiple golden nuggets of insight from leaders you wouldn't normally get exposure to. And if you're enjoying the podcast, which I really hope you are, why not subscribe to our ScaleX Insider 321 newsletter, where each week we provide you with 3 timeless takeaways, 2 inspirational quotes, and 1 reflection question to support your scaling psyche. Now, drum roll. Without further ado, Claire, you're very, very welcome to the ScaleX Insider podcast. I am delighted and thrilled as ever to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for having me back. I have to say you look great, and I was curious to know whether that was all the Tropics body butter you're now rubbing into your skin these days.
Yes, the wonderful Susie Ma product. No, I'm not rubbing any body butter into my skin, but I have had a wonderful July on the west coast of Ireland. Sun didn't shine that well, but it was time to kind of just step off a very, very, very busy start to this year. But you've been away as well. You're looking great. I see a lot of LinkedIn and social media posts from people who have been on holiday, come back, and they're communicating how positive that has been in terms of getting re-energized, reset, re-inspired. How has the summer been for you?
Well, thanks for asking. Just as you had during July, I had a great break. I actually had a great adventure, and actually building adventure into my life is very important. And for years, I wanted to go to see Niagara Falls. So we got the opportunity to do it over the summer. We started off our journey in Toronto. And I have to give a shout out to a great friend of mine who lives in Oakville, a suburb of Toronto, Rachel Williams, Jim Williams, and the lovely Evie and Paddy, her son and daughter. Rachel's an artist out in Oakville, and she is an avid listener of the podcast, big fan of the ScaleX Insider. So we started our journey there, and we worked our way across through Montreal, through New Hampshire, Boston, New York. And quite often, I have to say, I thought of Sharon Lecter on my journey, who asked, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And there was plenty of those. There was a few white water rafting moments, and whale watching, and all great experiences. So I have to say, I came back just with a lovely clear mind and feeling very relaxed. So
good on you.
Super summer so far.
That reminds me of something I've been reflecting on recently. It's something I read years ago and I journaled on in terms of how to have a fulfilling life. And there was 3 questions posed in that context. To have a fulfilling life, you must have something to do that's meaningful, which we clearly do. We absolutely love what we do. something to look forward to, which I know you'd been looking forward to that trip for a long, long time, and someone to love. And I'm very, very lucky that I reflect on the three a lot, and I always have those three. I always have those three front of mind, and really, the something meaningful to do is front and central in terms of our own purpose. Someone to love. I'm surrounded by people that I love dearly, both in personally and professionally, and I've always something to look forward to. So I'm delighted you had a wonderful trip, Claire. Season 9. What did you think in general before we get into some of your reflections and emerging themes?
Well, another season I absolutely loved. I think I've maybe mentioned this before, but I think this time particularly, you had a great variety of scaling leaders, anything, from Susie Ma, a female founder of a company who started it up and achieved great success, through to Jonathan Jay and Jamie Waller, who had great technical expertise around acquiring businesses and selling businesses. We had a couple of professors in there, Dr. Margie Worrell, Dr. Sri Kumar Rao, um, and who were real experts in their subject. Plenty around productivity. David Allen, Jamie Smart also talked about that subject. And yeah, just a really great variety. I always kind of look at the podcast in terms of what lens are they speaking through. And even the likes of Dr. Srimar Rao, a 72-year-old man who's clearly achieved a lot, who's not so focused now on the destination. He's just letting life unfold as he explained it. A very different way of looking at the world, as opposed to maybe a younger business leader, maybe in their 30s, who are very driven by an end goal and success along the journey. So lovely way to look at it, and a great variety of speakers. Um, I have to say as well, your questions are fantastic, and it really gives a scaling leader an opportunity to have a real educational masterclass on each one of those topics. And you go to a level that's deep enough where we can see a bit of structure and process behind the scenes. So never once do I walk away from an episode not really having a clear understanding of what I need to do next. So really, it's more than a conversation.
Yeah, I really appreciate that feedback. The podcast interviews are positioned in such a way that I imagine a room full of CEOs, and that we have invited this guest speaker. We've flown them across the world. We've put them on stage. We have invested significantly to bring them here. And I want them to deliver within the course of an hour as much value as they possibly can in terms of enabling the listener's scaling journey. So it's great that you're picking up the fact that there's lots of practical how-tos in there, because that's the way that I position the actual podcast interview itself.
And even the first question you ask every guest is, what is your definition of scaling with purpose? And I think that's very telling, because again, there were so many different definitions of scaling with purpose. And actually, just hidden in season 9, I have to say, was my favorite definition of purpose. And again, it was Dr. Sri Kumar Rao said, it's not like a shell that we find in the beach that we just come across it. And he talked about how it's already within us. And even Susie Ma talked about how purpose is a feeling. So I find in our world there seems to be an increasing level of pressure on individuals and business leaders to define their purpose, and particularly to define it so that it is addressing some big enormous global goals. But somebody's purpose who's working in a great business, who's contributing to a bigger picture, their purpose could be to interact with customers, some of whom might not get to talk to people. That might be their only interaction over the course of the day. And their purpose might be to, add a little bit of a lift to that person's step. But what a purpose, knowing that they're putting their skills to use and it's their value and it's uniquely their own. But it could be vastly different to anybody else's, but make the recipient feel great, make them feel great, and actually be making an incredible contribution, no matter how small.
Yeah, it's a wonderful insight. I had this conversation with George Kahn, the chairman of Patagonia, and Patagonia will, of course, it's revered for the cause-based purpose that it has centered itself on in terms of bettering the planet. But it's important to understand that it didn't just land there from day one. Yvon Chouinard, the wonderful founder of Patagonia, started out with a cause-based purpose, and he wouldn't have used this language at the time, but he simply wanted to make a better piton, a better product for the industry. He was really disappointed with the quality of pitons that climbers had to use, and he wanted to better that. He started with that competence focused purpose, and there'd be so many founder leaders out there who have started their business because they're so disappointed with the level of service or the quality of product that is existent within in the industry that they serve. He graduated given the following that he had for the quality product that he created to create a wonderful culture. So competence moved to culture, and eventually, given the heights that they reached in terms of their scaling journey, they arrived at a global cause-based purpose. But it was an evolution. Like Professor Sri Kumar Rao, like he said, it's whatever you give meaning to. In the early stages, I've no interest in pitons. Yvon Chouinard was fascinated with pitons and devoted, years in actually fashioning a much better product. He had, that gave him real meaning and purpose. So it's ultimately whatever you give meaning and purpose to. So I love that you've called that out. Claire, what were your reflections from season 9 and the some of the emerging themes?
Yeah, well, again, I saw quite a few themes coming through, probably quite different from previous seasons. The first theme I identified was all around courage. And Dr. Margie Worrell, she defines this as the decision to act in the presence of our fears, where we risk a loss of face for something more important. And Margie and Charles Kahn both talked about how we're naturally wired for safety and certainty and comfort, and risk aversion is it's we're wired that way. It's deep inside us. And in the context of scaling, when quite often you're taking a road that has not been traveled before, and you don't always know what's around the corner, and you certainly don't always have the answers. That element of courage needs to be present in everything that we do. And we see it regularly on our own ScaleX Accelerator program. And the reason why we do it is that we weave in a lot of uncomfortable situations whenever we're working and developing leaders. And the reason is because too often self-doubt wins, and we end up simply playing it safe. So I love that there's some questions that Margie posed. What are we really putting at risk if we don't take the risk? And I loved that, and it set me off in a bit of a bit of a deep dive. But I really liked it as well, where she said every time that we take courageous action, even whenever our palms are sweating and our hearts beating, she describes it as that we're reclaiming the power. And almost programming ourselves to become fearless. So every time we do it, we get that little bit stronger. So that came up time and time again. Charles Kahn also said, by loving our failures, we learn. So really love that, and actually, I would urge a lot of your listeners to start to ask the question. What is the bravest thing that they've ever done in business, and
Yeah.
could they be being held back by that whole concept of self-doubt? Is it stopping you from doing what you know inside you that you really need to do?
I love that, Claire. And Margie Worrell's I've quoted Margie Worrell since. Actually, she says, as a passionate lover of horses, growth and comfort can't sit on the same saddle and ride the same horse. And this is why purpose and vision are so critically important, because in one sense, vision is magnetizing you towards something greater, and purpose is to give you the energy to do that. And I also encourage listeners to look at that from a different angle. You know, if you have a purpose, if there's something truly meaningful to you, then again, I feel it's incumbent on you to act on that, because purpose without vision is huge potential unrealized. And we, I get posed the question a lot as to why psyche is the first principle of our 10 principle scale X framework. And I would assert, actually, and we've seen this now, 3 years into delivering our own program, probably 80% of scaling is in the mind. It's psyche acts as an impact multiplier for all of the other principles. And you've challenged our listeners with that. What is the one thing that's holding you back? And we hear kind of versions of imposter syndrome, call it kind of a self-limiting belief that people are imposing themselves. I am not an entrepreneur. I am not good enough. Who would want this product anyway? I don't really have something to say. Whatever version of that showing up, call that out. And as you have rightly said, Claire, doubt the doubts, because you have you have an obligation to bring your wonderful product or service to the world, as we always say. Courage, I love. What other themes, Claire?
Just before we go on to the next theme, one of the things again that Dr. Margie Worrell talked about was imposter syndrome, and she said it's actually the domain of it is not the domain of low achievers, meaning that it occurs in people who are ambitious, they're driven, they want to do better, they want more. So again, I kind of resonated with that because somebody who's been kind of hit with imposter syndrome myself over the years, it's encouraging to know that that's very normal, as a normal part of the journey. But it is something that is present in people who are pushing themselves on to do better and want more.
How did it show up for you, Claire? Did you avoid then kind of taking that leap? How did it manifest?
Great question. And if I think back to, gosh, Claire, whenever I was maybe in my 20s and I was working in a technology company, and I would have walked into a room, let's kind of describe it, a room full of suits around a long table, feeling very insecure, walked my way down to the very end of the meeting room, kind of taking my seat. And I probably carried a misconception with me for years. And that misconception was that the older you got, the wiser you became. And that's not always the case. Or the more intellectual, or the more intelligent, or um, but I'd never had the courage. I probably filled with imposter syndrome at that stage in my career because I never really had the courage to speak up or the courage to challenge. And at that point, I was in the role of HR. I had a great relationship with my managing director. He used to always say to me, Claire, the only person getting in your way is you. And again, because of that, we used to have great chats afterwards. So I always knew I got the feedback. I was always in the right path. But I think just really had to develop that confidence, and it comes a little bit, I think, with age, but it comes with experience of actually getting out there and doing it as well, where you kind of one day think, hang on a second, I do know what I'm talking about. Maybe times that you've kind of, been challenged or or whatever. So I think there's a combination of things that allows you to grow beyond it. But I speak with people even, in their more mature years within business, in their 50s and their 60s. People are still hit with imposter syndrome. It's one of the most normal things, but I think I really like the fact that Dr. Margie Worrell normalized imposter syndrome, said, typically it happens with a lot of us. It doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't be where you are, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. It's just that driver to keep going and do better and move forward.
Yeah. Wise words from your old MD. The only person getting in the way is you. How many leaders out there listening to this at the moment are actually getting in their own way? In that note, be careful of your language. What's the voice in your head saying, and is that the truth? And what I would always encourage people to think about and ask themselves the question: who will care about this in 100 years? Nobody. Is the reality. Nobody will care whether it's stepping onto social media for the first time to promote your product or services, to comment on a customer's testimonial about your customer's services, put your face as the leader of the business out there. Just take that step, and once there'll never be another first time. Once you break that new ground, it's done. Claire, what else? What courage is one.
Another theme coming through was, for me, I heard it from multiple guests, was around the subject of productivity. And that very much speaks to the middle section of our own ScaleX framework, which is all around, I guess, building the robust processes and systems to allow you to take your hands off and seek out those great opportunities that will help you to scale up. So I am a big fan of Maura Thomas. Heard her before, I think was it season 4, season 3, on the ScaleX Insider. And I was actually quite taken aback. She said that the most underrated problem for business is distraction. But whenever she threw in that typically every 47 seconds we change our focus on whatever screen you're using, be it a phone or a computer, that really surprised me. I didn't think it would be anywhere near that often. But I think then between Maura and David Allen, they shared some brilliant practical takeaways as to how we can increase our productivity. David Allen, obviously, he had the 5 steps of capture the information that's coming into your head, clarify it, organize it, reflect, and engage. A couple of key messages I took away there from Maura was, don't be a slave to your inbox. Or if you're going to continue to check your messages, make sure you do it in between tasks as opposed to whilst you're doing it, whilst you're doing the task. So again, diarizing your priorities, having those systems to be able to manage that level of communication to increase your levels of productivity. But I think there was one thing as well that came through from both, David Allen and Maura, and it was the role again of leaders within organizations. And very specifically, I can't remember either one of them talked about whenever we recruit people, we do it for their level of creativity, their experience, their expertise in a particular area. And then what we can do is overload them with communication to the extent where we actually don't get to see that. And it reminded me of it was an image I saw somewhere, and it was a leader with an umbrella up, and the umbrella was shielding the team from all the noise and the distractions that had the potential to hit them during the day and risk not achieving the goal. And I love that image. And you used the term, focus now is becoming a superpower. And actually, the purpose of that umbrella was actually to enable the team to do what they were setting out to do in the long term, and actually, where possible, to minimize the distractions. So I thought both of those guests give great insights, give great practical tips, and I think bottom line as well, with David Allen, he talked a lot about thinking, and sometimes we can allow those thoughts, 50,000 thoughts a day, but sometimes we can allow those thoughts to clutter our minds. And I'd almost add to David Allen's 5-step structure, because I think the last one needs to be something around, whenever you engage or whenever you decide to act, to make a decision. Because once you decide to make a decision, you stop a lot of the clutter and the noise. And whether it's the long term decision, but you make that decision right now and you live with the decision, and all the other noise goes away, which clears out a great amount of space in your head to do things that will really matter.
Yeah, I'm looking at my phone here because someone sent me a quote. Rather, sorry, we were engaging in a conversation. We'd listened to a podcast, and the quote that emerged from the podcast was that you become that which you are most consistently exposed to. And there's a couple of aspects of that. It's why we're so passionate about creating a tribe, a community of scaling leaders who can champion, cheerlead, and support one another. The leaders who are listening to this have an obligation to actually create an environment which cultivates great performance and wonderful productivity. And in the context of environment being so critically important to the person that those you're leading will become, as they spend so much time in your stewardship, that it's so critically important that you protect them from the noise and don't contribute to the noise. I received some wonderful feedback off that episode. I found David, he's a guru on all things productivity, and he really challenged me in that interview. One of our listeners came back to me and recommended Microsoft To Do at a very practical level, and I've been using it now for the last week. It is a revelation. As somebody who takes copious amounts of notes, I have different journals. I now have a Remarkable. I use my notes on my iPhone. I email myself. I have Todoist in the past. This has brought everything together, and something that we'll speak after this, Claire. It's something that I'd be keen to share with our own team. Microsoft To Do, and a wonderful little app, and it allows me now to record my thoughts as opposed to leaving WhatsApp messages in our own Teams channel. So I brought all of that together in Microsoft To Do. So then again, the power of podcasting is such that I am learning all of the time. So thank you, Adrian, for feeding that back and stepping me through Microsoft To Do. So courage and productivity. What else, Claire?
Yeah, probably hand in hand with productivity. There was definitely a theme around being more intentional with our thinking. And again, going back to David Allen, he talked about whenever we've got those 50,000 thoughts going around in our head every day and we can't stop those thoughts, it's an enormous drain on our energy. So yeah, again, Margie Worrell talked about the importance of carving out that time and that space. She said something really interesting, and she said that the universe is always speaking to us, but we're not always listening. And I guess carving out that space allows us an opportunity to kind of go back on our thoughts and try to recognize what those messages are. Susie Ma, and in terms of intentional thinking, Susie Ma gave a lovely example when she said, when in the height of when her business is thriving, it's really easy for her to dive in and try and solve problems instead of being more intentional and focusing on the things that are important. And Jonathan Jay, again, whenever he was talking about acquisitions, and this is something that we would hear that people want to scale, and a way of doing so is by acquiring other businesses. But it's, what are you trying to achieve by that? Where do you want the acquisition to take you? And that's a gap that maybe hasn't necessarily been thought through, because the acquisition is a means to an end. So it's, again, going back to Maura's stuff, she talked about how we work optimally whenever we've got a clear mind and we're intentional with our thoughts. So yeah, just that was kind of hand in hand with the productivity, but it goes back to, and I know this is a regular theme, but it goes back to carving out that space and time whenever we can take stock, reflect on our experiences maybe over the past 24 hours, and then reset and listen to those messages and tune into what the universe might be telling us.
Speaking of the universe, Professor Sri Kumar Rao believes that the universe is a benevolent one, that things are happening for us, not to us. What's your view on that?
Oh, that's a big question, is it? Isn't it? I think that the universe is working for us. It's certainly not working against us. Um, I've always believed in fate, which is another way of answering that question and saying, yes, I think that the universe is working for us. I think the universe sometimes, whenever we're going through challenging times, is redirecting us from something a lot worse. I draw on an experience. This is kind of back to that question around what's the bravest thing that you ever did. And I made a decision once in business, and I couldn't work out whether it was brave or stupid, frankly. And I had been working in a company for 15 years, and I absolutely loved my job. I loved doing what I was doing, and it wasn't the easiest. I probably was at times at the peak of um, busyness. I was maybe doing 18-hour days. I was maybe on and off flights 2 days a week. And the universe was trying to tell me to stop and to slow down. And it got quite to the extent, and I kid you not, I got off a flight one evening, came home, poured a glass of wine, sat down on the sofa, nodded off to sleep. And when I woke up, I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't get a breath. And in hindsight, that was something was happening to say, Claire, wise up, just stop, slow down, stop doing this. And really, probably stupidly, I didn't listen and I kept on going. But to the extent where it took something else to happen to me within that organization for me to say, okay, time out, let's have a conversation about how we part ways. There's things, and it could be really challenging. And actually, I didn't realize it at the time, but the decision I made to leave a business that I loved being in for 15 years without anything else to go to actually was redirecting me onto somewhere where I loved even more, I would say. And I spent 4 great years. I progressed my career. I met you. And sometimes the hard lessons are, steering you away from something else, but it's hard to see at the time.
Yes, and I'm glad you did heed the message from the universe. The universe, I've found, has a wonderful way of presenting the lesson to you in a different format until you learn it. You don't move beyond that level of the lesson that it's trying to teach until you've overcome that, until you've actually embraced that lesson. It will keep presenting it in lots of different formats until you learn the lesson. And often, unfortunately, it manifests in sickness and health issues if you don't heed the message. I'm a big believer in the universe is conspiring for us, and things aren't happening to us. And what ultimately you focus on expands. And it's why we always advocate and coach around the importance of having a vision, because ultimately that vision will drive the decisions you make and will ultimately inform what you prioritize in any given day, and will help you unclutter your thoughts, because you can check in to those thoughts and ask the question, are they conducive to actually you advancing towards the vision that you've set out? So until you have that vision, we just leave ourselves open to reacting to situations as they present themselves, as opposed to discerning whether those situations, those thoughts, those behaviors actually are aligned and congruent to the vision that we've laid out. Claire, I love those: courage, productivity, intentionality with her thinking. This is why I love these wrap-up sessions, because you go so deep with the themes, and how the one speaker supports another speaker, and in turn supports the principles that we coach around and that are enshrined in the 10 principle framework. Any other themes?
Yes, just one more. And I heard multiple guests talk about this as well, but I think it was maybe Jamie Waller at the end. He talked about finding magic in the mundane. And Dr. Sri Kumar Rao also talked about the journey is the only thing we have. And when we focus too hard on the goal, we can miss the journey. You know, Susie Ma talked about her journey in working with Tropic. And she talked about the euphoric highs and she talked about the devastating lows. And she still talked about the importance of having a smile on your face and having fun and enjoying the journey. And, you know, just last week, actually, I heard an incredible story. Many will know of the clothing and homeware brand Minaris. And this year, so they started in 1923. And this year they're celebrating their 100th birthday. And there's not too many companies that we interact with can get to the point where they're celebrating their 100th year. And just last week, I heard about the highs of the business whenever it was really in its heyday. And then I heard about, you know, the internet came in and the introduction of online sales. And 2008, the credit crunch hit. Then there was COVID. Then there was rising energy costs. And you know, it was fascinating. I actually felt like an episode of Netflix. It was told so incredibly well by Stephen McCammon of Minaris, and he talked about each decade, and it was enthralling. And I've got to say, it was a journey. It was a story of resilience and determination around. You know, a lot of people maybe would have told them, okay, now's the time, shut the doors, lights out, but they didn't. They got up, dusted themselves down, and they kept on going. And they're in a great place now. But again, it was a great story of the journey. And I would imagine for a lot of people in the room, a great journey to be part of. So David Allen actually said, you know, handle the mundane in your life and watch how you can achieve more. And again, one thing it started to make me think about was, you know, we often look at what we need to do more of, more than we do look at what we need to stop doing. And we then just add and add and add and add, and no wonder maybe people are getting stressed out. But if we did it slightly differently and you know, thought about what we had to stop doing, you know, we could be even better. You know, Jamie Waller wrote a book about it, you know, on Sexy Business. He talks about embracing the unglamorous side of business. So it's all the stuff that you probably don't talk about that maybe we need to analyze a little bit more. So
I'm going to give ourselves a plug here, Claire. In that context, simple scales, complex feels. If you're sitting at a computer now listening to this, Google how to scale a business. It returns within, you know, 0.004 seconds, 1.5 trillion returns from that Google search. So how on earth can business leaders who have ambition to scale wade through that noise? And it's why we've devoted our lives, our careers now to actually supporting others through the 10 principles, you know, stripping away the noise and actually taking them on this journey to scale. It's something that I was challenged with, certainly as a CEO, to actually discern what really mattered. I like cycling, and you know, but I'm not a bike builder. But in that context, I had to find the parts for the bike first of all and build the bike before I could get on it and do my CEO role. And what we've done here with the ScaleX framework is actually present to people 10 principles which represent fundamental truths of scaling. Because be careful of getting or drowning in the noise is what we're saying here, and that goes for lots of different elements of our lives. So thank you, Claire. Those are really insightful, and I always love your take on what you discern from actually listening to the podcast. Which is why these wrap up episodes are always so powerful. Is there anything that you heard for the first time that piqued your curiosity?
Yeah, probably a couple of quotes or one-liners that got me thinking. Um, Again, I will go back to David Allen. He said that the biggest human addiction is control. And then that was, I found that quite fascinating. And I've never heard that before. But Dr. Sri Kumar Rao then said that people like to feel in control, but the truth is we never have control, only the illusion of control. And I understand why we need that kind of feeling of order and security and safety and stabilization in our lives. But equally so, we see it quite often when there's a desire to have control, that sometimes it can, an excessive desire to have control, it can probably lead to anxiety, and could potentially make you miserable. So I think that was definitely something that got me thinking about control, and why that is, and what. Well, obviously we see it as well. Disney got there first, but let it go is something we find ourselves regularly saying to business leaders on our program, and that was a strong message that came through as well. I think let it go.
That's wonderful. Yes, we coach around those very three words. They're small, easily said, but so difficult for so many business leaders. And again, it's important to understand that the desire to be in control can often manifest as paralysis of your scaling ambition. The the ability and the desire to delegate is so critically important if you have ambition to scale. And
Mm.
that letting go the first time, the second time, sitting over somebody's shoulder when you've delegated something, understanding that they're not going to do it the way you do it, and surrendering to that is so critically important if you have ambition to scale. Otherwise, you become what we term dead man walking. You simply take on more and more and more, to the point where this wonderful business that you're leading chokes you. You become enslaved to this. So letting go, understanding that we have this desire to take control, can often act as the antithesis to scaling. So
Mhm.
something to reflect on, certainly. Where are you taking excessive control within your business at the moment? Which parts of your business can you delegate? What plays to your unique strengths, your unique ability, your zone of genius, and everything else really you should be delegating away, to allow yourself, first of all, to step up, to take the courage to step up, and create capacity for others to step into. Claire, uh, again, I want to thank you for your time. Before we close, tell us your three favorite takeaways from this season.
My three favorite takeaways. I gotta say, I they were great takeaways, but I'm going to attribute the first one to Jamie Smart and the way he presents this. He says the experience we're living in is all we get. The good life is now, and we've more influence over it than we think we do. So again, fascinating conversation with Jamie, but the way he worded that, the experience that we're living in as opposed to our lives. So it's all we get. So love that. I'm going to attribute the second one then to Dr. Margie Worrell. And again, going back to being courageous and taking risks, her takeaway was we feel more due to our cautiousness than we do when we take risks. So I think that is really something really to hold on to. Don't feel by not taking action and being overly cautious. Um, and learn to love your failures, as Charles Kahn said. But the third takeaway, then, I'm going to attribute actually to Jamie Waller's mum. As he said in his conversation, he said his mum always said, love and confidence is all a child and arguably an adult needs. And instilling confidence in someone can change their life forever. So that was just a wonderful takeaway. And Jamie, if you're listening, please thank your mum on our behalf for leaving us with that wisdom.
We need to thank all the mums out there, the wonderful mums. The Claire, I always challenge you at the end of each wrap up to share with the listeners a commitment on your part for the next 3 months in
I thought I
terms
was
of.
going to get away with that.
No, never. I want you first of all to share how you've progressed with your previous commitment. So you committed to begin meditating. So I'm interested to hear how that has gone for you.
I did. I actually made two commitments the last time we spoke. One was around seeking feedback from the team, because again, learning to be really good, as Kim Scott talked about the last time, learn to be really good at giving feedback, but also taking feedback. And my second commitment was to explore meditation. So the feedback, yeah, I've probably done it less formally. I haven't gone out, officially to ask for feedback. You and I love our feedback sessions. You and I sit down every 6 weeks, and we talk about what we could continue doing, stop doing, and start doing, which is great feedback, and it's very personal and it's really helpful. So I love giving you feedback to make you better, and listening to your feedback, which is ultimately going to make me better. And I have on two occasions now asked the team, what can I do more of to support you better? So I'm continuing to do that in the background. Meditation then, yeah, I've really enjoyed my meditation. I have to say, I've built 10 minutes meditating into my morning routine, and I use the little Headspace app. So I actually have done a program more about making mindful decisions, and really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed actually, first of all, just sitting and taking time out and getting that sense of peace and calm for 10 minutes whilst being given something to think about is very powerful. But one of the things that this particular program has taken me through is taking a couple of minutes actually to focus on my breath, but actually just to notice. And I think the words are quite well thought through, but just to notice, not to kick yourself about it, but to notice how many times your mind starts to wander, and then just simply bring it back to the breath. And that is quite mind blowing, because my mind clearly wanders way more than it should be. And every couple of seconds, I'm kind of drifting off into something else. So I kind of almost see that as a wee bit of exercising for in my brain. And it's like, it's that wee bit of training that I've never done before, but I actually am enjoying. So there's three parts to this program, and I'm going to commit to doing the second two. I'm really enjoying that journey. So thank you for recommending meditation. I know you really enjoy meditation yourself.
So
No, this one, that's not my full commitment. This one, probably two things. One, what I'm actually going to, probably a practical thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to commit to creating communication guidelines for our company. And that again is just around helping everybody to learn to what we use email for, what we use WhatsApp for. And again, it probably leans into Maura Thomas's talk on minimizing the distractions. And very quickly, it took me to a story. I was locking up my office one day, one evening. I was leaving a company, and I was walking out with the IT manager at the same time, who was getting super excited about thinking about another platform that he was just about to introduce, so that people could communicate on. And meanwhile, I was thinking, I can't manage all these communication channels that we've got in place already. So streamlining that and giving them a purpose is a great idea. So that's one commitment. And the second one, really, I don't fully have the answer to yet, but Susie Ma brought it to my attention. And again, it's not the first time I've heard it, but whenever she mentioned that 1% of female founded companies within the UK receive funding for growth. That's shocking. And I do believe I've got a role to play in that. I don't know what my role is yet, but I am going to make a commitment now to explore that a little bit further. I think the fact that there's very few female CEOs there, I'm going to explore that a little bit further, and I'm going to come back. I'm going to understand better what my role is to encourage more female founders, business leaders, particularly in our sphere of scaling up, to encourage more. And if there's any listening to this, we would absolutely, any support that I can give you as from a female to female to support your scaling journey, I'm so up for that. But I think there's something bigger, a bigger role for me to play there. So that's my second commitment.
Here, here, and I suspect that my daughter will be in touch. She took me to see the Barbie movie recently, and she's now gung ho to change the world as a result. So she might be in touch, Claire.
I love it. Go Barbie.
I love those, Claire. Well done, you. Look, as ever, I want to thank you for your time. You really go deep on the podcasts. You invest a lot of time in thinking about the key messages, the key themes, and distilling that for our listeners. So thank you so much. And yeah, I look forward to connecting again at the end of season 10, where we will be celebrating our 100th guest interview. So in the meantime, take care.
Watch this space. Thank you. Thanks so much.